Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Surviving, the safe space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to receive support, resources, and share their stories. Beyond Surviving is about freedom, healing, connection, and even laughter and fun. Most importantly, it's about letting go of the pain of abuse and finally moving on. I'm Rachel Grant, and I've been a sexual abuse recovery coach since 2007, and I'm the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage of recovery from sexual abuse. You can learn more about me and the Beyond Surviving program at rachelgrantcoaching.com. Well, folks, today I have here with me Camil Martinez, who is going to be sharing with us about her journey healing from childhood trauma and how sharing her story has led to even more healing. Camille is born and raised in California. She's a wife, a mother of 5 little bitties. Oh my goodness. She's a reader of true stories. And yes, a sexual abuse and sexual assault survivor who first suffered from abuse at the age of 6 that continued until she was 16. Camille went public with her story nearly 3 years ago, and in that journey, she's been finding her voice and coming into this space of being an advocate and an ally and being seen and being a voice for change. And one of the ways she's doing that is through her published story, Learning to Cope, which you can find on Amazon. So, Camille, I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad we got to connect and just, wanting to advocate as much as possible. So I'm just really glad that, we were able to connect to kind of get this out there and just, be able to do that. So
For sure. When you reached out to me, I was, thinking about how beautiful it is when we do reach this place in our journey. It's not a requirement, but for some of us, we come to that place of wanting to go kind of public and begin to share. And when I thought about, having you on and creating that space for you to talk about this beautiful relationship between storytelling and healing. But before we get to that, let's back up a little bit. Can you just tell us a little bit about your life, about your journey growing up? What would you like to share about that?
definitely growing up, I lived at home with my parents and my siblings. And then at 9 years old, my mom passed away of breast cancer.
Mm.
So me and my siblings bounced around a little bit, trying to, find that place of what now and kind of have
Yeah.
some
Oh
normalcy, but
gosh.
it
Sure.
took a really long time to kind of get that. We separated for a little bit with my siblings. I moved somewhere, my brothers went somewhere else, and then probably when I was about 11 or 12, we reconnected living with my dad's sister, and a lot of my trauma started when I went to live with her. It was just not a very healthy environment for me. It seemed like I was kind of like the outsider of
I
like
see.
the family. It seemed like I was more like just a visiting relative instead of like family. So there was some sexual abuse that did go on there that I kept, quiet about, just because I wasn't treated the best
Yeah.
living there. And so when it finally got to a point where I needed to say something so I confided in a friend, and she told the school counselor what happened, and then the school counselor talked to me about it, and then it got reported. But somewhere along the lines of it being reported, it kind of fell through the cracks where nothing was investigated, nothing happened. And I
Okay.
didn't realize it till I was like an adult that, anytime something like that gets reported, it's investigated, it's looked into, but for whatever reason, that wasn't. So I felt like, I was failed by the system, that it
Mm.
just kind of,
Big time.
it was one of these things of like it happened and you move on and you don't talk about, which I've learned a lot since I went public with my story and I met tons of survivors, that happens a lot.
Oh yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it happened, you don't talk about it, hush hush, you just move on. And it's like what people don't understand is when you're a victim of that, it can destroy your life and it
Mhm.
affects everything around you.
Yeah.
So, just kind of dealing with like sexual abuse and then trauma from that, and then dealing with like a verbally abusive, like family member, like all of that stuff wrapped up is a lot. So,
Yeah.
it was tough. I always say I didn't have a normal childhood. Like, I don't know what it was like to be just a regular kid, or just to have fun, play, laugh, like just do what normal kids do. I never felt like I was able to relate to other kids that I knew, because I
Yeah.
didn't know anybody like me. So, once I left my aunt's house, I moved in with my mom's mom, who, when I was 14, but still being there, I thought, things are going to be perfect, like the trauma's over. And then when I was in high school, I was sexually assaulted twice and didn't report it and didn't tell anybody. Like, I just kind of, I left it alone, because the seed was planted
That
of
was the
stuff
programming
happens,
already.
and
Yeah.
you don't say anything, you let it go, and so now being an adult and being a mom, and it's like, no, I would want that to be said and spoken about, but I didn't have adults who were there of like to protect me or give me the skills of like, you stick up for yourself or you protect yourself. Like, I didn't have any of that. I was just kind of going through the motions of, okay, like you learn as you go, and then if whatever you don't learn, you don't learn it until maybe you're an adult, maybe you don't. So I felt like, um because of the sexual abuse and the assault that I dealt with as being, a kid, and then in high school, I mean, you're still a kid, but it was just to the point that it got really bad, that when I was assaulted in high school the first time, it turned out that I found out later that it was like something planned between like boys at school, and they had a different version of it where they said, that we just slept together, and then everybody found out his version instead of the real version, and I was bullied at school and I was made fun of, and so I ditched school a lot because I just couldn't
Yeah.
deal
Who
with
wants
the
to be
trauma.
there? Yeah. Yeah.
So I ended up, the principal had mercy on me and said, you have two options. We can kick you out, or you can go on independent study and make up your credits. So that's exactly what I did. I left school, and, I got my diploma, but I wish I was strong enough back then to tell the reason of why I was never was at school. And, I got into like drinking at an early age, and, experimenting with drugs, just trying to mask feelings and trying to push everything aside. And, it's like, I didn't have my parents around. I didn't have my siblings. I never had adults around me to,
Right.
you know, that I could go to say, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, because it was always, you're not going to be believed, or I'm lying, or I'm making stuff up. So, I kind of just learned to carry that heavy baggage around for years, until barely 3 years ago, when I decided
Mm.
I just can't, it's too heavy.
Can't do it
I need
anymore. Yeah.
to, I need to be able to just set it free. And, I think a lot of people have questioned, why would I go public in a way of writing a book for the world to read? But to me, that was my way of healing and getting it out. That may not be everybody's, option, and that might not be everybody's way of doing it, but I've always wanted to be a writer since I was little. So I figured, since, this is just my way of doing it, and I
Yeah.
want to be able to, reach the people who have been silenced and haven't been able to speak. They're going to hopefully read this book and say, this person did it. Like, why can't I? It's okay to speak up. It's
Mhm.
okay to talk about this. And yeah, it may not be everyday conversation, but why not? Like, why
Yeah.
can't, this
Hey,
be conversation that
exactly.
you can have? Like, there's no
Yep.
shame in doing it, because you're not at fault for it. Somebody else made that choice to kind of do that to you. So, that was kind of my my way of just kind of getting it out. And the moment I did, um, it felt very like freeing. A lot of weight was lifted off of me. And I felt like, I mean, obviously now it's still not the easiest topic to talk about, but it's gotten easier as time has gone on. Like, will it ever go away? No. Are you never going to feel any emotion for it? You're always going to feel some kind of emotion. But as you continue to heal, it gets easier to know like it's not your fault. You didn't ask for that, and you can help other people along the way of, whatever it is, just listening, just, being by their side. I mean, you don't even have to talk about it. Just knowing that there's somebody else who can relate to you makes all the difference.
Yeah, cheers to that, Camille.
Yeah.
100%. There's so much in your story that I personally connect with. The place of first of all, just trying to kind of pretend like everything's okay here. I can really relate to that moment. And while there was a way in which my parents were aware and they were attentive about what happened, it was only so far. And then there was almost this moment of like, well, we don't know what else to do. And so we just kind of back burner it. And yeah,
Right.
kind of that place of feeling silenced and feeling unprotected in multiple ways, again and again and
Right.
again. The
Yeah.
repetition of that in your life, I can really see how, that created the context in which, when the next trauma happened, the idea of like, why bother? Like, I'm not even going to like bring this up. Not a lack of
Right.
strength on your part by any means, really more just the conditioning and the society that silences victims, right? And shames
Right.
people into silence. And I think that's something really important that you're bringing forward, and for you all listening to kind of think about, is the way that we get conditioned to just
Right.
deal. You got it. And then we make ourselves kind of bad or wrong for, we shame and we blame ourselves. So I love that you're bringing forward this place of, redemption and healing through the place of telling. And telling can be with a journal, it can be with a person, it can be with a counselor, it can be with a book, and it can be with a podcast, right? There are all kinds of ways to tell. But I want to go to this moment 3 years ago, because something happened. You described it as the like, I can't just keep doing this anymore. And I remember the moment in my life where that became really crystal clear, and it set me on a different path. Can you just tell us a little more about that moment, like the particulars of it? Like, what was happening in your life, or what was the feeling or the experience that just kind of flipped a switch for you, and let you take on the thing that you'd been fearing facing for so long?
So I had always, you know, I love to read, and I've always read, people's stories, and I love to read true stories. I've never been one to read like fake stories. It's something about those true stories that mean more to me when I read them. So I've always been a big reader. I've always written like in some kind of journal. And so I always said to myself, like, I want to write the story. So I think it was 3 years ago, and I wasn't working. I was at home, and I didn't really have a routine except taking the kids to school, and then I'd come home, and I said, you know what, I want to write. So I would write, all day, and just kind of get it out there, and then rearrange it and go back to it. And I told my husband, I said, I wasn't married at the time, but I told him, I said, this year, I really want to get my story out there. And he's like, okay. So I said, I really want to finish it. I said, I'm almost done. I said, now I want to look for a publisher. And he's like,
Mm.
okay. So I did my research, I did my homework, and try to find, I had no clue about what it takes to do any of it. So I ended up finding one, and they said, we have to be able to accept your story. So I thought, okay, I did the hard part of all the work and seeing these pages and seeing these words and rereading my trauma
Yeah.
basically over and over, which
Right.
sometimes it kept me from, I would stop writing because I was reliving a lot of those memories that I thought, okay, this is really, it's a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna pause it,
Take a
you
minute.
know.
Yeah.
And so I did that, but I think what took me the longest is getting past those hurdles and like
Mm.
all the trauma and emotion coming back to it. And then when I found the publisher, I submitted my story and they said, you have 7 days to hear back from us if we want it. So I said,
Oh,
okay, this is going to be the longest 7 days of my life to know if they even want my
mm,
story. So then it was
right.
like, maybe they're not going to want my story. Maybe it's not written well. Like I had all these, these things going on in my mind. So then I got the call that they wanted it. And I was like ecstatic, but it still didn't feel real because it was
Sure.
the
Yeah.
beginning. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And I waited. And then it was the getting it right. And, if I wanted to add pictures and, all this stuff. So I really took into consideration like characters of changing names and having to do all that because I had no idea. So finally, when they were ready, they said, "This is our final stage. Like, do you have like a picture of the cover or anything?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't think about that part. I just was thinking of just the story."
Sorry.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so they literally chose a cover that was perfect and everybody said, "Is that you?" And I says, "No, I don't know who that is. It's just something that went with the title." And the moment that I got them shipped to my house from the publisher, that's when it was real. It was like, I did
Yeah.
this. I wrote this. Like, this is
Hell
all my
yeah.
work, put into this and to hold it and flip through pages. And I'm a person, well, I'll buy books. I don't like Kindles and I have to feel the book and turn the pages and, do that whole thing. So once I got it, and people didn't know that I was writing this story. Maybe a couple people knew. So it was going to be a shock when
Yeah.
it
Right.
went like live. So when it was out, I shared my cover and the link to like Barnes and Noble and like Amazon, and everybody was like, "Okay, I want to read this." But I did tell people I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I don't want pity. I don't want any of that. This is not what it's for. It's
Yeah.
not for
Yeah.
anything else but to advocate, show that where I am now from what I went through, and that's it. That's all it is. There's
Love
nothing
it.
more behind it. So when people do, family members, it was hard for a lot of them to read it, and I did get backlash for it a lot. I got a lot of
Okay.
backlash. I got a lot of ugly comments, some reviews that weren't very nice, but
Mm.
I realized that, no matter if you do something good or do something bad, there's always going to be somebody who's going to have something to say. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Truth.
So I said, this isn't for anybody else. This is for myself. And that's what it was for. So I knew that I would get, comments and whatnot, but I didn't realize how much it was going to be that a lot of people took it very personal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I said, you know what? Everybody has a right to their own opinion. You can say what you want to say, but this is my truth. This is my story. Nobody knows what I went through but me. Like
That's
nobody was
right.
there. So,
Yeah.
that took a little bit. That was a huge deal for almost 2 years where there was talk, and some families didn't talk to me anymore, but I couldn't keep hiding, and I couldn't keep that hidden because it was going to make somebody else uncomfortable. I had to be vulnerable with the world and make myself uncomfortable to get this out
Well,
because it's not about everybody else, it's about myself.
mhm.
And when you carry trauma and baggage and things like this into your marriage, being a parent, that's a lot. Like it affected your
Yes.
everyday life with like jobs and just making friends and being a parent and thinking, can I get married, do I want to get married, like all these things, because you have all of this stuff. So my husband didn't really, he knew a little bit about some of it, but he really got the gist of it from my book.
Yeah, he
Like
was able to have a deeper insight into what your
yes.
experience was like.
So once I sent it to the publisher, I let him read it before it was like out.
Mm.
and he read it, and he, got to really like get why I say things I say, or why I react to things I say. And I have triggers still all the time, but
Mhm.
it's gonna be, that's just gonna be there. I'm not, I've had to go through a lot of things, but it's just part one's out. I'm currently working on part two that I'm trying to finish. And everyone's like, when are we gonna get book two? And I'm like, life happens. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I work. It's like, if I
Yeah,
could
well,
write
I
full
mean,
time, I
you're only like doing all kinds of things in life
yeah,
too. Yes, right. Yeah, no,
yeah.
fair,
But
fair.
I feel like
Yeah,
it was, part one was like the foundation of who I kind of am,
yeah,
of,
yeah.
and it's kind of like, so it'll be a trilogy. So I'll have part two and three, and then I don't know if anybody's story's ever really finished, but it's kind of like,
Sure.
you get to your, happily ever after. You get to your third, and then, and then you get to, just see things differently after kind of expressing what your story is. Everybody has a story. It's just
For
if
sure.
you are, willing to share that story. And that might not be everybody's thing to do, but that was just mine. As my healing process has been sharing and talking and just getting that out there. And it's like, even if only one person read it or 500 people read it, my thing wasn't about making money off a book, or it was just having my story out there. And if it helped one person, then it did what it was supposed to do.
Right
It
on.
wasn't for anything else. So yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
expect to be like this filthy rich person because I wrote a book. It was just, this was just
Yeah.
my way of healing. So yeah.
A place of expression. I love what you said about telling your story is for yourself and no one
Hmm.
else, because I know so many of my clients really struggle with the place of, how do I tell my truth and protect people? And I think
Yes.
there's a beautiful thing when we really give ourselves permission to say, you know what, I'm going to tell my story as authentically and honestly as I can.
Mhm.
And the people in this story, are, there's a great quote that says, if you don't want me to talk bad about you, then don't do bad shit. And it's just,
That's right.
well, like, and like, it's not our job to protect or to take care of, right?
Yeah.
And we can hopefully, like, it can open conversations and dialogues. And yeah, sometimes there is fallout, but I just love the permission, that you're offering to folks in this way. And it's also really just beautiful to witness and hear how the process of writing was healing, even if challenging at times, like being
Yeah.
with your story, being with those experiences. It's like a moment of, facing the thing, and then raising up your voice in a way that says, to hell with all of you people who thought I just needed to be silent and not talk about this and don't talk about it and
Yeah.
ignore it. Like, I'm not running that show anymore. Sorry, we're turning a
Yeah.
new page here.
Oh yeah.
And just the empowerment of that. um can you speak to a little bit of that? I think you've said some, but I want to just highlight a little bit more. Like, what were ultimately some of the benefits of, really sharing your story, writing your story, telling it?
So I feel like one benefit that I can truly like see now is, I can, obviously I wrote my story, so like I know what's in there. But when I actually went into my book and like kind of scrolled through just like the chapters, it it shows me how much I've gone through in a short period of time, and like still overcame that. And it's like, I may have not been in one piece, you know,
Mm,
when I got to the end, but somehow I made it to where it's like, I came out of each situation, yeah, probably stronger in a lot of ways. But the benefit of me being able to write that and be vulnerable and say, yeah, um, this happened to me. It's not my fault that it happened. I can't control what others do, what they
yeah.
what they plan. It's like, it's happened. It's just unfortunate. It happened from the ages of, starting at 6 years old, where at 6 years old, you're just supposed to be a kid, and not worry about
Right.
these types of things.
Exactly. Yes.
But unfortunately, I did.
Mhm.
And at that age, I was still living with my parents. And when it was a friend of my dad's who happened to touch me, and I was just kind of like in shock, like, what is going on? And I ran inside and told my parents. And I remember my dad like ran outside to chase this person, but he was gone. And my dad knew where to find him. But even after that happened, it wasn't talked about. Like to say, I'm sorry this happened, or it wasn't your fault, or
Right.
anything. It was just like it happened, and we just, we had dinner that night, and I mean that was
Right.
it. It was like never discussed, never talked about. I mean, I never seen this person again. But at that age, at being 6, like people think, well, how do you remember that? Or it's like when trauma happens, you remember. You don't
Mm,
forget
mm,
things like that. You just don't.
mm.
So it was like, even though I'm sure my parents probably didn't know maybe how to deal with that situation, maybe they've never had to deal with that. So maybe they didn't know what to say, but it was something that it just from 6 years old to things happen, you just move on type thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was kind of
Right.
like the narrator starting from my story of things happen, you move on, you don't talk about it, and they go away. Well, they really don't go away. They just kind of build up and stack up on each other until it's
For
too
sure.
heavy and you
Yeah.
can't carry it no more, and then you explode, and then you're a basket case, you feel like. So it's like,
Yeah.
it took me years to even talk about it in therapy, like that things
Mhm.
like that happened. Like I couldn't. It was like it wasn't something that I could just talk about easily, so I didn't even know how to like say these things. So my kids know that I wrote a book. They
Mm.
my oldest is 20, and I let him read it only because I was a young mom. I was 18 when I had him, and when I wrote it, I was kind of not sure if I wanted my kids to read it yet,
Yeah.
just because
I
it's
hear
it's a
that.
lot. It's
Tricky.
a lot.
Yeah.
But I let my oldest read it because I wanted him to really kind of get like that backstory of me, and
Yeah.
kind of see like, okay, like, you know, I think when you're a mom, like your kids just see you as like just a mom. Like you didn't have a life
Yes.
before us, and you
Totally.
weren't a teenager, and you weren't this. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I
No, I
was.
lived a life. I definitely
Yes,
lived a life.
yes.
Yeah.
You guys are just, not my life. Like I was a person before having, my kids. So I wanted him to really get it. And he had
Mm.
anger towards people who did things to
Sure.
me. And, and I told him, I said, I was angry for a long time. But I, this is my way of kind of like, if you stay angry at these people, they're still winning, because
Mm.
you're letting them affect your life. You're letting them make you have bad days because you're still carrying this anger around. So,
Yeah.
and probably because he's my oldest and I'm his mom, it's like something was done to his mom that he can't, take care of or
Yeah.
protect me
Fix or
for.
solve or
So,
change. Yeah.
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 So, I wanted him to read it. My other kids have not read it. I have 4 boys altogether, and then I have my daughter. My boys are 17, 16, and then a 12-year-old, and my daughter's 9. So I've told my older kids, like, if you guys want to read it, like, that's fine. There's still some kind of, I wouldn't say maybe shame. There's just still unsettling feelings having your children know that, I've been through awful things, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so to me, I think it's just that's just hard for me to kind of swallow.
Well,
So
I think it's a very important point that you're bringing out, because a lot of times when people who've experienced trauma are in this debate with themselves about, do I
yes.
tell my story? How do I tell it? How do I share it? Do I go public with it?
Yes.
Absolutely. For those who have children, that's a part of the conversation. And even if it's not I'm going to write a book and publish it, like, when do I tell my kids? Do I tell them about this part of my life? Do I, share about this experience? And
Yes.
when's the best time to do that? And I think it's a very
Yes.
individual decision. I think it has a lot to do with the
Oh yeah.
kid and the kid's capacity and various
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah,
yes,
for
how you're
sure.
holding the experience, influences. So, it's an important thing to talk about, because there's a way in which we want to, I think, children to have the landscape of who we are.
Yeah.
And then doing that, in a mindful way, which you're doing, right? You're kind
Right.
of sorting through the pieces of that. And
Yeah.
it is tender. It's
Yeah.
super vulnerable. I think what I would offer is that maybe not the shame, but what you're naming is like, oh, it doesn't quite feel like shame. It's just vulnerable, to be like, here's my stuff, right? And
Yeah.
how's
Yeah.
that going to,
Right.
impact
So I
things?
mean,
Yeah.
I think just I honestly don't care what strangers or family members or anybody have to say. It was more concerned for my kids. It was like,
Yeah, I get that.
my kids are my main priority, and they're the ones that their feelings matter to me. And
Yeah.
I never want them to feel uncomfortable or anything like that. And we live in California, in the valley. Everybody knows each other, so it was like that kind of kept me, I think, a little bit from sharing my story, only because everybody knows everybody, it seems like, living in a
Yeah.
small town.
Yeah.
So I thought, what my plan was is I was going to create an alias and still share my story. But then I thought, if I do that, I'm still hiding. I'm still letting other people like not see the real me. So I decided, you know what? The hell with it. I'm going to put my name on there,
Yeah.
and it is what it is. I mean, what can I
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
So that I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I put my name out there and that people know that it's me. Of course, I did change names and whatnot, but people ended up figuring out like characters, like they just did. I mean, without
Yeah.
me saying anything, like they just put the puzzle pieces together. And I'm appreciative of the support I've got and the encouraging words that I've got from either fellow survivors or people who didn't ever feel like I was lying or anything for that. Of course, the ones who gave me the bad comments and whatnot, it's like, it's fine, you guys can feel however
Yeah.
you want to feel. But I think my main thing was that I was just worried about my kids.
Yeah.
So I
Makes
mean, they
sense.
know that I still am writing and that I want to continue doing that.
Continue the
But
story, right? Yeah, because I
yeah.
love that, because now there's like, what are the next chapters? The chapters around, yeah, like the healing journey and finding yourself
Yeah.
and what more you're discovering. And I know that you're stepping into other ways that you're kind of supporting and advocating. I know you have a Facebook group, helping victims
Yes.
become survivors. And so I'll make sure the link to the Facebook group is in the show notes. Can you tell folks a little bit about what they could expect if they come and kind of participate in that group?
Yeah. So basically, I decided to create this group from survivors that I was meeting, that did share their story with me and that did go public with their story. I wanted them to be able to have a safe place that they could come and they could vent, or they could just share things maybe around their community, or just have somebody to talk to if they were having a bad day. Like, just because we come out with our story, we're never really healed. So it's like, just because we share doesn't mean like, oh, we're
Yeah,
gonna have
right.
great days every day. Like, no, that doesn't happen. That
Yeah,
that
no.
doesn't happen. So it's like, I just wanted to kind of create something that um you can just, hi, how are you, have motivational quotes there. Some would share their journey if they were like going to court for whatever. I mean, just anything
Yeah,
that had to do with that. I wanted that to become something that we all were connected by our stories.
beautiful.
And
Love
so
that.
I chose the name Helping Victims Become Survivors, because yeah, at one time we were victims, but we're not anymore. Like we survived that. Like we are survivors. So I wanted like them to know, like, yeah, we probably all have felt like victims at one time or another, but we made it. Like we are not there anymore. Like we're able to share our story, and we, we're survivors. So shortly after, going public and creating my group and meeting people, I decided that I wanted to get the sexual survivor tattoo symbol. I don't know if you've seen that symbol before, but that was like
Mhm.
a huge, huge
Is it the
deal to me.
comma or something else? A semicolon?
So I do have the semicolon, which that
Okay.
is for like, that's for like, um, what is it, like depression, anxiety, that's for
Mm.
like suicide, like stuff like that.
Oh,
But
yeah,
the
yeah,
but the
okay.
sexual abuse survivor symbol, it's like I can't even explain what the symbol is, but I had seen it, especially around April when
Okay.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
and I was like, this is my like, my warrior like stamp, like, I made it
Mm.
this far, I was able to do it. So I decided that that was going to be probably my, my favorite tattoo to really feel like I made it this far. Of course, when I do get the questions of like, oh, what does that mean? It's
What's it
still
about?
sometimes
Yeah.
kind of like it's hard to get out sometimes, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's just, I mean, it's not really a an easy like topic, but I want to be able to have it be where it's
Right,
easy, where it's
right,
not like, oh, it should be shameful or you should be
right. You have to
embarrassed.
whisper it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
No,
want to
I
be
love
able
that
to,
too.
not, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that's one of the things that, with every voice that raises up, every story that gets told, we are more and more normalizing. I mean, I remember early on when I started my business and I started, going to parties or whatever, and somebody would, the the ever obvious question, what do you do for work? And I'm like, oh, oh yeah, okay, like immediately now, like we're
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
conversation. And yeah, it took some time to like decide how I wanted to answer that question. Also to give myself permission to sometimes answer it differently. Like sometimes just to be like, I'm a coach. I work with personal development. And then sometimes I'm a sexual abuse recovery coach because, sometimes I have the space to hold for other people and their questions and their
Right,
inquiries that come, or even their uncomfortableness, right? That I'm going to have compassion
right.
for, sympathy for. And so, always giving ourselves permission that, we get to answer how we want to answer. And then, but as we do that more and more, and we get more and more comfortable, so do, I think the conversations around us become more empowered. Yeah. So I
Oh
love that,
yeah.
Camille.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel like, you know,
Mm,
um, the more that it is spoken about and the more that people can really, not judge somebody for things they had no control over, and to not make
yeah.
somebody feel ashamed for
Oh
their
my gosh.
past, or,
Right.
it's like why can't,
Mm,
people just be compassionate and know things are out of their control, and everybody has a story, nobody's story is alike. It's like even though you can connect with other survivors, their stories aren't the same. Like they're different,
man.
so
Well, on that powerful note, said that any better. Yes, Camille. Thank you so much for being here with me today and for sharing your story and modeling, the power of transparency and speaking your truth. I love that so very much. And I hope you all listening will go get Camille's book, Learning to Cope. It's on Amazon. Last name is Flores instead of Martinez, but you'll find it. Check it out. And the link will also be in the follow-up email or in the show notes. So Camille, again, thank you so much for being here.
thank you. Yeah, for sure. I'm so glad we got to connect. And yeah, I mean, I'm just hopefully when, the next book comes out, you'll, see that and just kind of see that progress of, how things are going. Hopefully I do get into, I would love to get into public speaking and talk about these topics of, sexual abuse and sexual assault, and just advocating for others who feel like they don't have a voice,
Yeah.
writing other survivor stories. Like those are my plans. So, we'll
Love
see.
it. All right.
Yeah.
Sharing that vision for your future on.
Yes.
Yes, keep me posted. Yes, let me know when the next
Okay.
book is out.
Yes, of
And
course.
Yeah, really appreciate you. Awesome. Thanks for being
Yes.
here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining us today. As always, you can pop over to rachelgrantcoaching.com to learn more about sexual abuse recovery coaching and explore the resources on the site. Be sure to subscribe the podcast and then come back next time because we have so much more to share. And until then, take good care of you.